For nearly 90,000 years, the human story unfolded in a world that would feel almost unrecognizable to us today. There were no cities, no writing, no kingdoms rising above the horizon. There were no roads, no monuments, no walls to separate one group from another. The earth stretched out in all directions, wild, open, and constantly shifting. Every valley, every forest, every frozen plain was part of a world untouched by the inventions we now consider essential. In this vast expanse of prehistory, life moved with the seasons. The land itself was alive, not just with animals and plants, but with forces that shaped the fate of every human group. Winters could last far longer than memory. Summers were short, precious moments of warmth and abundance. Rivers changed their paths, forests expanded and receded. The sky mirrored the uncertainties of the earth, changing from clear blue to storm gray within moments. This was the world before civilization, the long, silent era when humanity learned how to live with nature rather than control it. Imagine the early world at dawn. A cold mist drifts across an endless plain. The grass moves gently under the wind. In the distance, the silhouettes of ancient animals graze quietly. Mammoths, giant bison, and wild horses trace paths across the land, unaware that the humans following them depend on their movements for survival. There are no houses here, no permanent villages, only temporary shelters made from branches, hides, and stone. These shelters do not last long. They are built only for the moment, designed to withstand the night or the week. When the seasons shift, the people move again, following the land's rhythm. This is the first truth of the ancient world. Humanity did not shape the earth. The earth shaped humanity. Life was guided by instinct and ancient memory, memories carried across generations through practice, demonstration, and spoken words. A mother teaches her children how to recognize dangerous weather. A father shows his son how to track a herd in the snow. Elders gather around the fire and speak of places where berries grow, where rivers flood, where predators lurk. There were no written instructions, no maps, no charts. Knowledge survived because people remembered, because forgetting meant death. But this world, despite its harshness, was not empty. It was full of meaning. Every place held a story. Every season carried a lesson. Nature was not something distant. It was a companion, a force that shaped each day. The wind could bring warnings. The stars could guide a journey. The cries of animals could signal safety or danger. Those who lived in this era understood the earth with a depth that modern humans have nearly forgotten. Their attention was sharp. Their senses were attuned to every detail. The sound of cracking ice, the scent of an approaching storm, the pattern of animal tracks in soft soil, these were the languages of survival. Yet life was not only struggle. There was beauty in this ancient world. There were moments of peace, mornings when the sun rose slowly over a quiet landscape, evenings when firelight flickered on stone walls, nights when families sat together beneath a sky sparkling with more stars than we can see today. In these moments, people rested. They shared food. They laughed. They told stories. They watched their children play along the riverbanks. Civilization did not yet exist, but community did. Humanity's greatest strengths, cooperation, care, and connection were already present, forming the roots of everything we would one day build. This era stretched across continents. In Africa, groups moved through warm savannas. In Europe, humans braved the cold winds of glacial plains. In Asia, families hunted along vast forests and river networks. In Australia's ancient lands, early humans adapted to deserts, coasts, and rainforests. Though separated by oceans and mountains, these groups shared a silent truth: they belonged to the land. There were no borders, no nations. People did not think of themselves as part of a country or civilization. Their world was simply the world, vast and mysterious. They walked paths shaped not by politics, but by rivers, migrations, and seasons. And still, the earth continued to change. Ice ages advanced and retreated. Landscapes transformed again and again. Entire regions became uninhabitable, forcing people to move across thousands of miles. This movement was slow, generational, sometimes invisible. A group might travel only a few dozen miles in their lifetime, but their descendants would cross continents. This is the second truth of the ancient world. Humanity's identity was movement. We were wanderers long before we were settlers. Our bodies, our minds, our culture, all were shaped by the act of moving through the world, learning from it, adapting to it. And as people adapted, they became resilient. Their bodies evolved for endurance. Their minds evolved for problem-solving. Their communities evolved for cooperation. Every challenge made them stronger, more adaptable, more capable of surviving the vast unpredictability of the ancient earth. Still, there was no written record of these achievements. No walls to preserve their memory. No carvings to honor their leaders. The people of this world lived entirely in the present, yet they carried the past within them and prepared for a future they could not imagine. This long era before civilization remains one of the most mysterious chapters of human history, not because nothing happened, but because everything happened without leaving written traces. Our ancestors evolved, adapted, invented, created, and dreamed long before the first cities appeared. Civilization is only a recent chapter in our story. But this long, forgotten age, this quiet era of instinct and survival, built the foundation for everything to come. As this chapter draws to a gentle close, imagine once more the world before civilization. The sun rises over a wild, untouched landscape. A small group of humans walks slowly through tall grass. Their shadows stretch long across the earth. They do not know they are part of history. They do not know what the future will bring. But they walk forward anyway, guided by instinct, memory, and the eternal rhythm of the world. The silent era has no monuments, no books, no names, yet it shaped us in ways we still carry today in our curiosity, in our resilience, in our longing for connection and meaning. Before civilization, there was life, quiet, wild, mysterious, and it was enough. For most of human existence, we were travelers, quiet wanderers moving through a world far larger and wilder than anything we know today. There were no fixed homes, no cities rising from the soil, no borders drawn across the land. Instead, there was only movement. Slow, steady, generational. A rhythm of steps that carried our species across deserts, mountains, and frozen shores. Humanity did not stay still. Humanity walked. This endless migration began not with ambition, but with necessity. The world changed constantly, warmth turning to cold, rivers shifting their paths, animals following ancient routes. To survive, humans followed these patterns. They read the land like a book, interpreting signs in the wind, the soil, and the stars. Imagine a small group crossing a vast plain at dawn. The air is cool, the land stretches to the horizon in every direction, and the sky slowly brightens into shades of gold. They move quietly, each person carrying bundles of tools, food, and memories. Their shadows lengthen behind them. Their steps echo softly across the earth. This simple act, walking, became the defining movement of our species, and with each step the world changed. The first twist in this story is subtle but profound. Human identity was shaped not by where we lived, but by how far we moved. The migrations were not quick. They unfolded over thousands of years. A family could spend their entire lives within a few hundred miles, yet their descendants might eventually reach distant continents. The journey was larger than any one lifetime, carried forward by countless generations. As groups traveled, they encountered new landscapes, towering mountains where the air thinned, dense forests alive with unknown creatures, deserts shimmering with heat, icy fields where nothing seemed to move except the wind. Each new environment demanded adaptation, and humans adapted. In warm regions, they developed lighter shelters and gathered fruits and plants. In cold regions, they crafted furs and built fires that lasted through the night. In mountainous regions, they learned to climb and navigate steep paths. Near coasts, they built rafts and explored the edges of continents. Movement became knowledge. Migration became survival. Across Africa, early humans crossed savannas and riverbanks. Across Eurasia, they ventured into colder climates, learning to hunt reindeer and mammoths. Across Southeast Asia, they navigated islands and coasts, eventually reaching Australia. As the Ice Age ebbed and flowed, some groups crossed land bridges that no longer exist today. This was not just traveling, it was exploration on a scale unmatched by any other species. And through these migrations, humanity changed physically as well. Bodies adapted to different climates. Skin tones varied with sunlight exposure. Lungs expanded at high altitudes. Diets shaped our teeth and bones. Culture adapted too. Tools, traditions, and beliefs evolved with every new environment. The second twist of this chapter is this: migration was not chaos. It was guided by patterns, nature's patterns. People followed rivers that promised water. They tracked herds that moved with the seasons. They waited for stars to rise in predictable paths. These celestial patterns became the first maps, guiding travelers through deserts, forests, and plains. Imagine a group resting on a hillside. Night falls, and the sky above them fills with stars, brighter and more numerous than we can imagine today. The people point to specific constellations. They remember their movement from previous years. These memories become direction, and direction becomes journey. In this way, the stars carried humanity forward. Yet for all the movement, these migrations were not lonely. People traveled in groups, families, extended families, small bands of cooperating individuals. They shared food, responsibilities, and stories. When one group met another, they exchanged knowledge, tools, and sometimes members. These encounters shaped the diversity of our species. Every meeting was a new beginning. Every path was a merging of stories, but migration also brought challenges. Storms could wipe out entire groups. Droughts forced people into unfamiliar lands. Ice could trap travelers for seasons. Predators followed the same routes. Many journeys ended quietly, lost to time. Yet others continued, carried forward by new generations who remembered the paths of their ancestors. The world constantly asked for endurance, and humans answered. The third twist comes quietly. Migration did not just spread humanity across the world, it shaped the human mind. Movement taught planning, it taught cooperation. It taught memory and foresight. It taught humans how to adapt faster than any other species. Every step forward was a lesson in survival. Every new land demanded imagination. People needed to picture what lay ahead: food sources, shelters, dangers. This ability to imagine the future, to prepare for what had not yet happened, became one of our greatest strengths. Migration made us thinkers. As thousands of years passed, the footsteps of countless travelers connected continents. North, south, east, west, humans reached every environment the Earth offered. They stood on the edge of icy seas. They climbed mountains taller than anything they had known before. They walked through forests where the canopy blocked out the sun. They crossed deserts where the horizon shimmered endlessly. This movement created the human world. When groups finally settled, much later when agriculture began, they carried with them thousands of years of memories. Knowledge of landscapes, patterns of weather, skills of hunting and gathering, stories that stretched back into eras with no written words. Migration created culture long before cities did. As we come to the quiet conclusion of this chapter, imagine once more those ancient travelers. A trail stretches across a valley. A line of footprints leads toward a distant ridge. The people do not know they are mapping a future world. They do not know that one day their descendants will cover the earth. They only know the sky above them, the land beneath their feet, and the path they must follow. For 90,000 years, humanity was a species of wanderers, a species defined by movement. A species shaped by the rhythm of walking from one horizon to the next. Civilization came later, writing came later, but migration, endless, patient, determined, built the foundation for everything we are. The world before cities was a world of footsteps, and every one of those footsteps led us to the future. Long before cities rose into the sky and long before villages dotted the landscape, humanity discovered something far more important than walls or tools. We discovered each other. We discovered the quiet bond of community, small groups of families gathered around warm fires, sharing the long night and the long journey of survival. In those ancient days, the world was immense, cold, and full of uncertainty. There were predators in the dark, storms that arrived without warning, and landscapes that changed with each season. But when humans gathered around a fire, something changed. The darkness felt less threatening. The cold lost some of its power, and for the first time, people had a sense of belonging. These were not cities, these were not buildings or organized societies. They were circles of warmth in a world of shadows. This is the first truth of early humanity. Society began not with stone, but with fire. Imagine a night tens of thousands of years ago. The wind moves through tall grass like a whisper. The stars shine brightly overhead, untouched by light or pollution. A small band of humans huddles near a fire. Sparks rise into the sky and fade into the darkness. The flames illuminate their faces, tired from the day's journey but peaceful in the moment. The fire provides more than warmth. It provides safety, light, and comfort. It draws the group together, holding them in a shared circle of survival. This was the birthplace of the first families. Families in this era were not simply blood relations. They were groups of individuals who depended on one another completely. Children were cared for by everyone. Food was shared. Decisions were made as a group. Out of necessity, cooperation became instinct, not a choice. The second twist of this chapter is subtle. Family was not just biological, it was communal. A child might be raised by multiple adults. Elders played vital roles as teachers and storytellers. Hunters relied on one another with absolute trust. Gatherers shared their knowledge of plants and seasons. No one survived alone. The structure of early human society was woven from these small threads of cooperation, and at the center of it all was fire. Fire changed how humans lived. It extended the day, allowing people to stay awake long after sunset. It kept predators at a distance. It made food safer and easier to digest. It created a space where the first conversations unfolded, simple perhaps, but meaningful. Around the fire, people shared stories, fears, hopes, and lessons from the land. The fire became the heart of human life. Imagine an elder telling a story, their face lit by the red glow. Children listen quietly, their eyes wide with wonder. Adults carve tools or prepare food. Someone repairs a spear, someone tends to the fire. The crackling sound fills the night, marking time in a world where clocks have not yet been imagined. These moments were the beginnings of culture, not written culture, not artistic culture, but a culture of memory, lessons passed from one generation to the next. Here lies the third twist. The first form of human society was storytelling. Before writing, before symbols on cave walls, stories were spoken aloud. They described dangerous places, sacred places, migration routes, and memories of ancestors. These stories traveled across generations, shaping identity and guiding decisions. In many ways, the first human communities were built from the stories told around the fire. Fire gave us a place to reflect and dream. Family gave us a reason to survive. Together, they shaped the earliest human world. As time passed, these bands of families developed routines that defined their way of life. They woke with the sun, hunted or gathered food, traveled as the seasons demanded, and returned to the fire each evening. The fire was more than a tool. It was a companion. A constant presence in a constantly changing world. And for tens of thousands of years, this pattern continued. Sometimes families joined with other families, forming slightly larger groups. The gatherings were temporary but meaningful, exchanging knowledge, tools, and sometimes partners. These interactions strengthened the human species, spreading new ideas across enormous distances. Yet even in larger groups, fire remained the center. Each fire created a small circle of light, a small world within the vast darkness. Around these fires, the earliest human values took shape, sharing instead of hoarding, cooperation instead of isolation, respect for elders, protection of children, loyalty to the group. These values did not come from laws or rulers. They came from the simple reality that survival required unity. Life around the fire also produced the earliest rituals. People learned to honor the dead, to celebrate the hunt, to give thanks for food, and to prepare for the unknown. These rituals, though simple, became seeds for future religions, myths, and cultural practices. The fire became more than a physical force. It became a symbol of life itself. Imagine a family waking before dawn. The fire has burned low overnight. Someone stirs the embers, breathing life back into the flame. The rising sun paints the horizon in pale colors. The world begins again, quietly, humbly, and beautifully. There were no monuments to these early families. No written record of their names. No ruins to mark their existence. Yet they laid the foundation for everything humanity would ever build. The warmth of the fire carried forward into the warmth of community. The circle of people around the flame became the blueprint for villages, tribes, and eventually civilizations. The shared meals became the roots of culture and tradition. The stories told in the dark became the myths, legends, and teachings that shaped the minds of future generations. As this chapter draws to a gentle close, picture one final scene. Night has fallen. The cold presses against the edges of the camp, but within the circle of firelight, people sit close together. Their faces glow with warmth. Their voices blend with the crackling flames. Their hearts beat with the quiet knowledge that together they can face the vast world. This is where human society began. Not with stone or metal, not with writing or architecture, but with one small flame and the families who gathered around it. In the glow of those ancient fires, humanity discovered connection, and connection became our greatest strength. Long before agriculture, long before villages and trade, the heartbeat of human life was the hunt. It was the great test, the great teacher, and the great unifying force of the ancient world. Hunting was not merely a task, it was a way of being. It shaped intellect, patience, strength, and cooperation. It demanded awareness, discipline, and deep respect for the land. In those early days, the earth was vast and alive with creatures we no longer know. Mammoths moved across frosted plains. Giant bison gathered in herds that shook the ground. Elk with towering antlers roamed dense forests. Predators stalked the same trails humans followed. Every animal had its place in the rhythm of the world, and early humans learned that rhythm step by careful step. The first twist of this chapter is quiet but powerful. Asterisk hunting was not chaos, it was understanding. Imagine a small group of ancient hunters walking silently at dawn. The sun rises slowly, painting the ground with long shadows. Their breath hangs in the cold morning air. They carry sharpened stone tools, simple in appearance but shaped with great skill. Their clothing is made from hides stitched together by experienced hands. Their eyes scan the land with extraordinary focus. They move not toward a destination but toward a pattern, one they have studied across years and seasons. Animals left signs everywhere. Hoofprints pressed into soft soil, bent grass along a trail, tufts of fur caught on branches. The hunters read these clues as easily as we read words on a page. They knew how long ago a herd passed through. They knew whether the animals were calm or frightened. They knew if predators had followed. The earth was an open book and humans learned how to read it, but hunting was more than physical skill. It required patience, hours of waiting, listening, and watching. The hunters might sit motionless at the edge of a clearing, hidden among the trees, breathing slowly so as not to disturb the air. They studied the wind, the behavior of birds, the sound of approaching footsteps. In these moments, the world grew silent and the hunters became part of the landscape. This patience shaped the human mind. It taught focus. It taught strategy. It taught endurance. Hunting required planning that reached far beyond the present moment. People had to think ahead, predicting weather, migration routes, animal behavior, and the needs of their group. They had to imagine the path of the hunt before it began, envisioning outcomes that had not yet occurred. This is the second twist. Hunting strengthened not just the body, but the imagination. To anticipate movement, to cooperate with others, to picture success before it happened, these were mental transformations that helped shape human intelligence itself. Hunting was practice for planning, foresight, and innovation. But no hunter succeeded alone. Early humans learned that cooperation was more powerful than individual strength. A single human could not outrun a deer, overpower a bison, or outwit a mammoth, but a coordinated group could. Hunters communicated through gestures, glances, and soft sounds. Each person had a role, one to track, one to flank, others to drive the animal forward. These roles were not random. They were taught, refined, and passed down through generations. Cooperation created unity. It created trust. It created an unspoken understanding that survival depended on everyone working together. In this way, hunting shaped early society. Imagine a hunt unfolding on a wide plain. A herd grazes in the distance. The wind carries their scent toward the hunters. Slowly, carefully, the group spreads out. One signals silently to the others. They begin to guide the animals toward a narrow pass between rocks. The movement is fluid, almost rehearsed, honed by countless attempts before. When the moment comes, they strike quickly, efficiently, skillfully. The success of the hunt means food, tools, warmth, and life. Failure means hunger, danger, and long nights of waiting. The stakes were always high, and this shaped not just individuals, but entire cultures. Hunting rituals emerged as a way to respect the animals and honor the effort required to bring them down. Some communities painted scenes of hunts on cave walls, powerful images that blended memory and myth. Others used special songs or gestures before or after a hunt. These rituals were not just tradition. They were gratitude, connection, and reflection. And through these traditions, early humans developed something even deeper, a sense of relationship with the natural world. They did not see themselves as conquerors but as participants in a larger cycle. The animals they hunted were not merely resources, they were part of the world's spiritual rhythm. Every successful hunt was a gift, and every mistake was a lesson. The ancient earth demanded resilience, it demanded respect, but it also rewarded knowledge. Over thousands of years, the hunters learned the migration patterns of herds. They learned where animals drank, where they slept, where they sought shelter from storms. This knowledge became a map, not drawn on paper but carried in memory. It guided migrations, shaped seasonal movements, and determined where families settled, even if only temporarily. And in this way, hunting guided the very path of human expansion. When prey moved north, humans followed. When herds shifted toward the coast, humans adapted. When animals traveled across narrow land bridges, humans crossed them as well. The footsteps of hunters helped carry humanity across continents. As we near the end of this chapter, imagine a final scene. Night falls after a long hunt. A fire crackles softly. The hunters sit together, tired but alive, warming their hands in the glow. The stars stretch endlessly above them. Children listen as adults tell the story of the day, what went right, what went wrong, and what must be remembered. The hunt becomes memory. Memory becomes knowledge. Knowledge becomes tradition. And tradition becomes the foundation of society. Hunting shaped not only the survival of early humans, but the essence of who we are. It sharpened our minds, strengthened our bodies, and deepened our cooperation. It taught us patience and strategy. It forced us to imagine the future and to respect the world around us. Before fields were planted, before herds were domesticated, before cities rose, there was the hunt. Quiet, demanding, transformative. In the ancient earth, the hunters were the thinkers, the teachers, the leaders. And through their efforts, humanity learned how to endure, how to thrive, and how to dream of the world that lay ahead. There was a moment, spread not across a year, but across countless generations, when the human mind began to change. It did not happen suddenly. It did not burst into existence like fire or lightning. Instead, it grew quietly, slowly, like dawn spreading across the horizon. And yet this transformation would shape the future of our species more profoundly than any tool, any invention, or any discovery. This was the age when the human mind awakened. For thousands of years, early humans lived by instinct. They followed herds, the seasons, and the shifting landscapes of a turbulent earth. Their survival depended on memory, observation, and cooperation. But eventually, something deeper began to unfold, a new kind of thinking. A new way of seeing the world. Imagine a small group of ancient humans resting beside a fire. The hunt is finished. Night has fallen. Sparks drift upward into the sky as children doze against their parents. Someone stares into the flames a little longer than usual, thinking not about the day that passed, but the day to come. They imagine a hunt before it happens. They picture its dangers, its possibilities, its outcome. This simple thought, the ability to imagine beyond the present moment, became one of the great turning points in human evolution. The first twist of this chapter is subtle but extraordinary. The mind didn't just grow. It began to dream. Asterisk dreaming did not mean sleep. It meant imagining what did not yet exist. It meant planning for tomorrow instead of merely reacting to today. It meant picturing tools before they were made, strategies before they were tested, journeys before they began. This shift separates humans from every other creature that walked the earth. Birds navigate oceans. Wolves plan hunts. Primates use tools, but humans imagine worlds that have never existed. As this ability grew, so did the complexity of human life. People began to invent new methods of communication, sounds, gestures, patterns of behavior that carried meaning. Early humans developed shared symbols, precursors to language. They taught through demonstration and explanation, not just mimicry. Knowledge expanded. Now imagine another scene, a parent guiding a child's hands as they shape a tool from stone. The child does not just learn the movement, they learn the idea behind it. They learn intention. They learn why it matters. And one day they may change the technique, making the tool sharper or more efficient. This is the second twist of the chapter. Innovation began with the awakening of the mind. When humans learn to think forward, they learn to improve. A tool could be reshaped. A shelter could be rebuilt stronger. A hunt could be planned differently. Progress emerged not from necessity alone, but from imagination. This awakening also transformed social life. People began to communicate more clearly, more meaningfully. They shared ideas and emotions, warnings and hopes. Memory became something larger than the experience of a single person. It became shared across a community. The nervous systems of individuals evolved into a collective intelligence. Families told stories around the fire. These stories explained where food could be found, how to track animals, and which places held danger. But the stories also carried meaning beyond survival. They taught identity, belonging, and purpose. In these early stories, we can see the beginnings of culture, and culture gave rise to something even more profound, the birth of spirituality. Humans began to notice patterns in the world, patterns that hinted at something greater. The cycles of the moon, the path of the sun, the return of the seasons. They began to feel a connection to the unseen forces of nature. They developed rituals and beliefs, simple at first, but powerful. It was during this awakening that the first myths were born. Not written myths, not organized religions, but the earliest attempts to understand life, death, and the mystery of existence. The mind was no longer limited to what it could see. It reached for what it could feel. And as human thought deepened, so did cooperation. People began to plan hunts together with greater coordination. They developed strategies, roles, and responsibilities. They communicated intentions before acting. The result was greater safety, greater success, and greater unity. But the awakening was not just mental or social, it was emotional. Humans began to experience grief, compassion, longing, and hope in deeper ways. They mourned their dead. They cared for the sick. They formed attachments that lasted a lifetime. Evidence of healed injuries in ancient bones shows that early humans cared for individuals who could not survive alone. This reveals an astonishing truth. Empathy evolved alongside intelligence. The awakened mind was not just a tool of survival, it was a bridge of connection. And yet these changes were slow, stretching across thousands of years. There was no single genius, no single inventor. These transformations were carried quietly by parents teaching children, by hunters sharing knowledge, by elders repeating ancient wisdom. The awakening of the mind was a collective act. Imagine the dawn of a new day during this era. A group prepares to travel across unfamiliar land. They look to the sky, recognizing the position of the sun. They discuss which direction offers the best chance of finding water or prey. They plan, not out of instinct, but through deliberate thought. This kind of planning would one day lead to exploration, agriculture, architecture, and civilization. But at this moment, It is simply a necessary tool for survival. Still, the seeds of the future are there. The final twist of this chapter is gentle but profound. Humanity became human long before civilization began. The moment the mind awakened, civilization was set into motion, although its arrival was still tens of thousands of years away. Every invention, every story, every idea, every ritual grew from these early sparks of thought. The human mind became our greatest tool, our greatest weapon, our greatest mystery. As the chapter closes, imagine one last scene. Night has fallen. A small band of humans sits around a fire beneath a vast, star-filled sky. The flames dance softly. Someone shapes a stone tool, imagining how it will be used tomorrow. Another person teaches a child how to recognize the call of a distant animal. An elder whispers a story about the first people to walk this land. In this quiet moment, the ancient world breathes, and the human mind continues to awaken. For 90,000 years, this awakening guided us forward. Shaping who we were, shaping who we would become. The mind did not just evolve, it opened. And through that opening, humanity stepped into the long path towards civilization. There was a time when we were not alone. A time when the world held not one kind of human, but many. We walked the ancient earth beside cousins whose names we would not learn for tens of thousands of years. Neanderthals, Denisovans. Mysterious groups known only through fragments of bone, strands of DNA, and the faint traces they left in dark caves and quiet valleys. They lived, they loved, they dreamed, and then they vanished. Their absence remains one of the great unanswered questions of prehistory. Before modern humans spread across the continents, these other human species flourished in regions both harsh and beautiful. Neanderthals mastered the cold landscapes of Europe and Western Asia. Denisovans lived high in the mountains and deep across Siberia. Other ancient humans, whose names we will never know, inhabited islands, coasts, and forests far from the places we call home. For tens of thousands of years, our species shared this world with them. We crossed the same rivers. We hunted the same animals. We sheltered in the same caves when the storms arrived. This is the first twist in their story. They were not primitive. They were adapted. Neanderthals crafted sophisticated tools, hunted with strategy, and cared for the sick and injured. Denisovans left behind signs of genetic brilliance, traits that allowed their descendants to thrive in high altitudes where modern humans would gasp for breath. And yet, despite their strength, despite their knowledge, these human species left no written story. Their lives unfolded in silence, preserved only in the earth beneath our feet. Imagine a Neanderthal family inside a cave at dusk. A fire flickers softly, painting their faces in warm light. A child plays with a carved piece of bone. An elder repairs a spearpoint. Their world is cold but peaceful, shaped by cooperation and resilience. Nothing about them suggests a species on the verge of disappearance. Yet somewhere in the long sweep of time, their populations began to shrink. Not all at once, not everywhere. But slowly, steadily, like embers fading from a dying fire. The second twist is that their disappearance is not explained by a single cause ***. We once believed modern humans replaced them swiftly or violently, but the evidence tells a quieter story, one of complexity, climate change, dwindling populations, and rare contact with our ancestors. Some groups may have merged with us through interbreeding. Some may have moved into harsher lands as climates shifted. Some may have simply been too few to endure the demands of an unpredictable world. Their extinction was not a moment, it was a fading. Picture the world 50,000 years ago, Ice sheets advance across the northern continents. Forests shrink and expand with the seasons. Animals migrate in patterns that shift with the cold. Small populations of Neanderthals and Denisovans find themselves in landscapes where survival becomes harder each year. Meanwhile, modern humans, more numerous, more connected across groups, move steadily into the same territories. Their networks of cooperation give them advantages in adaptation and resilience. But the disappearance of these ancient cousins was not a conquest. It was a quiet, gradual unraveling. The third twist is whispered through ancient DNA. They are not gone entirely. They live on in us. Across much of the world today, fragments of Neanderthal and Denisovan DNA remain in modern human populations. These fragments carry memories of ancient encounters, ancient unions, ancient moments where two human species met beneath the stars and shared more than just the land. Their genes help modern humans adapt to cold climates, high altitudes, and even certain diseases. Their legacy is alive, woven into our very cells, but their stories, their beliefs, their daily lives, their fears and joys are lost. No one wrote about their first hunts. No one carved their names. No one recorded their myths or rituals. Their existence is stitched together through archaeology, a jawbone in a Siberian cave, a finger bone from a child who lived thousands of years ago, stone tools left in the soil, ash from a fire long extinct. From these fragments, we rebuild entire worlds. Imagine Denisovans living in the high mountains, stepping across ridges where the air is thin and cold. Their lungs, their blood, their bodies shaped for environments modern humans struggled to survive. Their shelters blend into the landscape, hidden from storms. Their lives unfold quietly, carried by generations whose names were never spoken again. Or imagine a Neanderthal community in winter. Snow falls softly outside the entrance of a cave. Inside, family gathers close to one another. They share meat from a recent hunt. Someone hums a gentle, rhythmic sound, perhaps not language as we know it, but the beginnings of song. These scenes are not fantasy. They are echoes, supported by evidence of care, ritual, and emotion. For these species were not simply our biological cousins. They were fellow humans in every meaningful sense. Their bodies were strong, their minds were capable, their lives were full, and yet they vanished. Why? Many possibilities rise and fall like shadows, climate shifts that transformed the land faster than small populations could adapt. Competition for dwindling resources, isolation that weakened genetic diversity. Rare but meaningful interactions with modern humans. But in the end, the world changed, and they could not change with it as quickly as we did. Their disappearance is a reminder that human history is not a straight line. It is a branching tree filled with paths that ended too soon. We are the last surviving branch of a family once rich and diverse. As this chapter comes to a gentle close, imagine one last scene. A quiet valley at sunrise. The last surviving members of a small human group, Neanderthal or Denisovan, walk across frosted grass. Their breath forms clouds in the cold air. They do not know they are the last of their kind. They simply continue as humans always do into the unknown. And then one day their story ends, not with a disaster, not with a war, but with silence. Yet their legacy continues through us, in our genes, in our abilities, in the ancient story of humanity. The lost human species disappeared from the earth, but not from the human story. Their memory lives in our blood, and in the unanswered questions that still linger in the quiet corners of prehistory. For most creatures on Earth, survival depends on staying within familiar boundaries. A species evolves for one environment, a forest, a plains region, a coastal habitat, and lives within the limits of that world. But humans were different. We were wanderers, shaped not by one landscape but by all of them. Wherever the earth opened its doors, humans entered. And once inside, we learned to thrive. Across deserts, tundras, rainforests, mountains, and scattered islands, humans flourished in places that demanded extraordinary resilience. Our ability to adapt is so vast, so unusual in the animal world, that scientists today still struggle to fully explain it. How did one species learn to live in so many worlds, under so many skies, facing so many extremes? The story begins in Africa, the cradle of humanity. Warm grasslands stretched endlessly, dotted with trees that shifted like dark silhouettes against a rising sun. Here, early humans learned the fundamentals of endurance, how to hunt under a relentless sky, how to find water in dry seasons, how to navigate by wind and stars. Our bodies were shaped for running long distances, for sweating to cool ourselves, for surviving heat that would overwhelm most animals. But the world did not remain constant. And neither did we. When humans moved northward into colder climates, their bodies began to change. Skin tones lightened to better absorb sunlight in regions where the days were shorter and softer. Fat distribution shifted to preserve warmth. Shelter building grew more sophisticated. Clothing became essential. Fire became a lifeline instead of a comfort. Adaptation was no longer just physical. It was mental, strategic, creative, imaginative. Picture a group of early humans entering a tundra landscape for the first time. Snow stretches to the horizon. The wind bites at their faces. The sun hangs low and pale. Nothing resembles the warm savannas they once knew. And yet they do not turn back. They learn to stitch hides into protective clothing. They learn to track animals whose hooves crush snow instead of grass. They learn to navigate not by trees or rivers, but by stars and the shape of distant mountains. This is the first twist of the chapter. Humans adapted not by changing the world, but by changing themselves. In deserts, they mastered the art of water memory, knowing where hidden springs lay across vast distances, understanding the paths of migrating animals, recognizing which plants held moisture. Their bodies learned to withstand heat, and their minds learned to live with scarcity. In rainforests, humans developed intimate knowledge of plants, insects, and dangerous animals. They learned to move through dense undergrowth with silence and precision. They learned what was poisonous and what could heal. Their senses sharpened in the shade of towering trees. On islands, humans learned to build boats, to fish in deep waters, and to use tides for travel. They adapted to life with limited resources, developing tools and traditions that fit the rhythm of the sea. In high mountains, humans faced air thin enough to weaken most creatures. But over generations, their bodies changed. Hearts grew more efficient. Lungs expanded. Blood carried oxygen more effectively. These changes happened slowly, quietly, invisibly, as if evolution itself leaned closer to guide the way. Adaptation became humanity's greatest strength. And yet there is something more mysterious at play. The second twist is this: human adaptability was not just genetic, it was cultural. When one group learned a technique, they shared it. Knowledge moved from parent to child, from neighbor to neighbor, from one band to another during chance encounters at rivers, coastlines, or hunting grounds. Techniques spread across continents long before writing existed, carried not by ink but by memory. A clever way of sharpening a tool. A new method for trapping animals. A safe route through dangerous terrain. A method for preserving food during harsh winters. These ideas did more than help individuals survive, they reshaped entire communities. Culture became its own form of adaptation. Imagine a young hunter learning from an older one how to spot a distant herd through shimmering desert heat, or a group in a dense forest learning which plants ease pain and which cause it. Imagine families on an island learning the currents of the sea so well that they could navigate without landmarks. This knowledge was not just practical, it was profound. It allowed humans to do what almost no other species can: change behavior faster than biology can evolve. Instead of waiting thousands of years for natural selection, humans adapted through teaching, learning, and innovation. A new idea could change a group's destiny in a single season. This flexibility made humans unstoppable. But there is still one final twist to the story. One mystery that remains unsolved. Why humans? Why did our species develop such extraordinary adaptability? Other animals survived in their niches, but none crossed continents with such success. None adapted to both ice and fire, to ocean and desert, to heat and cold with equal determination. None rewrote their way of living as quickly or as completely as humans did. Scientists offer theories: changes in brain size, social structures, mobility, and language, but none explain the full picture. Something about humanity allowed for rapid transformation, constant learning, and the ability to see not just the world as it was, but the world as it could be. Adaptation, in the end, may be the most human of all traits. As we reach the close of this chapter, imagine one last scene. Night falls across a landscape of extremes, a desert that cools beneath the stars or a frozen plain wrapped in silence. A small group of humans gathers around a fire, their clothing shaped by the land, their tools suited for the world around them. They speak softly, sharing knowledge learned from their ancestors. Their bodies carry the memory of countless generations who adapted before them. Their minds carry the wisdom of journeys across mountains, rivers, and vast stretches of unknown land. They do not think of themselves as part of a grand story. They do not know how remarkable their adaptability truly is. They simply live, adjusting to each new day, each new season, each new horizon. But their quiet resilience shaped everything that followed. Humans did not conquer the world. They adapted to it, again and again in endless forms. And through that adaptability, we became the species that could survive anywhere and dream everywhere. There was an age when the world was cold enough to reshape continents. An age when ice stretched across the horizon like a great white wall, towering over everything that lived. Glaciers carved valleys deeper than rivers, redirected oceans, and altered the face of the earth. This was not a moment of history, it was an era, a long and unforgiving chapter that tested every creature that walked beneath the sky. For humans, it became the ultimate teacher. The Ice Age did not simply chill the world, it transformed it. Forests shrank. Grasslands expanded and then vanished beneath frost. Rivers froze in winter and flooded in summer. Animals migrated in patterns unlike anything before. The world narrowed into scattered pockets of warmth, small safe havens where food, water, and shelter still existed. To survive, humans had to learn from the cold. Imagine a landscape tens of thousands of years ago. A silent plain stretches beneath a pale sky. Massive sheets of ice gleam in the distance, catching the sunlight with a harsh, metallic brightness. The wind carries fine crystals of snow that sting the skin like needles. Not a tree is in sight, not a bird sings. The world is immense, empty, and dangerous. A small band of humans moves slowly across this frozen land. Their clothing is thick with fur. Their faces are hidden behind layers of hide. Each breath forms a cloud that vanishes in the icy air. They travel not for comfort, but for survival, seeking a valley where animals still roam, where firewood can be gathered, where the cold is harsh but not deadly. These frozen migrations shaped the destiny of our species. The first twist of this chapter is this: the Ice Age did not defeat humanity, it refined humanity. In these harsh conditions, humans learned resilience. Their shelters grew stronger, their tools more precise. They learned which animals could withstand the cold and how to track them across icy plains. They learned how to build fires that lasted through nights when the temperature fell so low that breath froze to the ground. They also learned cooperation on a scale previously unseen. In the cold, isolation meant death. Warmth came not just from fire, but from community. Groups huddled together through storms, shared food when hunting failed, and used every scrap of fur, bone, and sinew to keep one another alive. Adaptation became not only a skill, it became a philosophy. Now imagine a temporary camp built against the curve of a cliff. Snow is piled high around the walls to block the wind. A fire burns in the center, glowing red against the dark. Children sleep wrapped in hides. Hunters sharpen their tools. Elders watch the sky, reading signs in the gray clouds. There is no comfort here, but there is life. And in the Ice Age, life itself was a triumph. The second twist in this story lies hidden in the landscapes. The cold was not just an enemy, it was a sculptor. As glaciers advanced, they carved valleys that would one day hold rivers and cities. They shaped the terrain that future civilizations would depend on. They formed passageways that guided migrations and blocked others. Every ridge, every slope, every carved basin was a signature of the Ice Age, written across the earth with frozen hands. Humans learned to navigate these icy signatures. They followed meltwater streams to new hunting grounds. They tracked herds of mammoths, reindeer, and wild horses across frozen grasslands. They used the edges of glaciers as landmarks, massive walls that marked the boundaries of their world. But the Ice Age did more than shape the land. It shaped the body. Humans evolved broader faces in colder regions to warm the air before it entered the lungs. Their bodies conserved heat more effectively. Their diets changed to rely heavily on meat and fat, providing the energy needed to endure the cold. These adaptations were gradual, unfolding across generations, but they reveal a truth both beautiful and humbling. Humanity did not merely survive the Ice Age. It became a part of it. Now picture a hunting scene. A group of humans moves quietly through falling snow. Their breath hangs in the air like mist. Ahead, a herd of reindeer grazes near a frozen lake. The hunters communicate through gestures, every movement calculated to conserve energy. A coordinated strike follows, swift and efficient. The success of the hunt means warmth, tools, food, and hope. In these moments, the cold taught humans not brutality, but wisdom. It taught timing, it taught precision, it taught patience greater than the ice itself. The third twist arrives in silence. The Ice Age forced humans to become thinkers of time. In warm climates, mistakes could be forgiven. A failed hunt could be corrected the next day. But in the frozen world, every decision had consequences. Every journey required planning. Every shelter had to be built with the future in mind. People learned to think ahead, weeks, months, even years. This long-term vision became one of humanity's most defining traits. As the Ice Age progressed, human groups spread widely. Some found refuge in sheltered valleys where rivers stayed unfrozen. Others lived near coastlines where the sea offered food even in winter. A few traveled across frozen land bridges that connected continents, pathways that exist today only in memory and myth. These migrations were not quick, but they were transformative. They carried humans into Asia, Europe, and eventually the far edges of the world. People followed the retreat of the ice as climates warmed. They settled in lands that had once been buried beneath glaciers. The melting ice revealed rivers, forests, and fertile plains, new worlds ready to be explored. And with each new world, humans adapted again. As we approach the quiet close of this chapter, imagine one final scene. A thaw is beginning. Drops of water fall from the edge of a glacier, carving tiny streams into the earth. The wind is cold, but not as sharp as before. A family stands near the melting edge, watching as the ancient ice begins its slow retreat. They do not know that they are witnessing the end of an era. They do not know that the world is changing once again. They simply feel the air growing softer and they follow the warmth wherever it leads. The age of ice tested humanity in ways we can scarcely imagine. But through resilience, cooperation, adaptation, and wisdom, humans endured. The cold did not freeze us. It forged us. It shaped our bodies, our minds, and our future. And when the ice finally began to melt, humanity walked forward, not weakened, but made stronger by the silence and the struggle of the frozen world. Long before the first city rose from stone, long before the wheels of civilization turned, humanity was quietly inventing the foundations of everything we know today. Not in workshops, not in temples, not in kingdoms, but in forests, caves, riverbanks, and open plains. In the silence of prehistory, the earliest inventors worked not with metal or machines, but with the materials the world placed in their hands: stone, wood, bone, fire, and imagination. Their names are lost. Their voices are silent, but their legacy is everywhere. This chapter tells their story. Innovation began not with complexity, but with curiosity. A stone that fit the hand just right. A branch that bent without breaking. A hide that could wrap the body against cold winds. In these small discoveries, entire worlds changed. Imagine an early human sitting at the edge of a stream. Their hands turn over a piece of flint, sharp on one side, smooth on the other. With slow, thoughtful taps from another stone, sparks fly. Edges form. The flint becomes a blade, simple yet extraordinary. That blade can cut meat, carve wood, shape shelters, and defend against predators. This is invention in its purest form, a moment of understanding born from observation and patience. And this is the first quiet twist of the chapter. The greatest early inventions were not sudden breakthroughs. They were gradual awakenings. For thousands of years, humans shaped stone tools with increasing precision. They learned how certain rocks fractured, how to hold them, how to strike them, how to sharpen and polish edges. Each generation improved what the previous one had begun. No one invented the blade. Humanity perfected it together. Tools were only the beginning. Shelters emerged next, structures made from branches, hides, bones, and earth. These were not permanent homes, but temporary havens built with surprising skill. In frozen lands, people constructed domes of snow and ice. In forests, they wove leaves and branches into protective walls. Near coasts, they used driftwood and animal skins to shield themselves from rain and wind. Innovation was everywhere, hidden in the small details. A new knot that held tighter. A stronger frame for a shelter. A new way to stretch hides so they dried faster and lasted longer. These were the inventions that kept humanity alive through the world's most difficult eras. But invention was not limited to survival. It reached into the realm of expression. The earliest baskets were woven with a precision that reveals remarkable creativity. Crafted from reeds, grasses, and fibers, these baskets carried food, tools, and firewood. They represented the first forms of storage, a concept that would one day support agriculture, trade, and entire civilizations. Yet at the time, they were simply part of daily life. Simple, functional, beautiful in their quiet way. And then came something even more astonishing: art. Long before cities or writing, humans painted, carved, and sculpted, not for food, not for survival, but for meaning. A handprint on a cave wall, a carved bone decorated with patterns, a figure shaped from clay or ivory. Imagine the moment a human dipped a hand in pigment and pressed it against stone. The shape left behind was not just an outline. It was a declaration: I was here, we were here. This is our world. Art was more than decoration. It was communication across generations. And from art came something equally profound: clothing with purpose and design. Early humans stitched hides with bone needles, creating garments fitted to their bodies. They decorated these garments with beads, shells, and ornaments. These creations kept them warm, but they also expressed identity, signaling roles, families, achievements, beliefs. Clothing became an invention of both survival and culture. Ideas did not stay in one place. They moved slowly but surely. This is the second twist of the chapter. Innovation spread not through writing, but through wandering. When groups met at rivers, coastlines, or hunting grounds, they exchanged more than food or stories. They exchanged ideas. A new technique for crafting a blade, a method for weaving baskets, a way to build a better shelter. These ideas traveled across continents, carried on foot, passed from one person to another. Imagine two groups meeting after months or years of separation. Children gather curiously. Hunters examine one another's tools. Women compare baskets and weaving patterns. Elders share stories of distant lands and strange animals. In these moments, innovation blossomed, not in cities, but in these quiet exchanges beneath the open sky. And yet the most remarkable part of early invention is this: it happened without the concept of invention. There were no creators seeking fame, no workshops with masters and apprentices, no competition to produce something new. Innovation was simply a way of life born from necessity, observation, and imagination. Every new idea was a response to the world's challenges: a colder winter, a longer journey, a new landscape, a new kind of stone found along a river. Humans adapted and invention followed. Today we see stone tools and baskets in museums. We admire cave paintings illuminated by soft lights. We study needles carved from bone, ochre pigments, spearpoints, and ornaments. But when these objects were first created, they were not artifacts. They were solutions. They were stories. They were expressions of human thought. And they were made by people whose names history will never know. They were the hidden inventors of the ancient world, the quiet architects of human survival. As we near the close of this chapter, imagine one final scene. A small group sits beside a river at twilight. The sky fades to deep blue. The fire crackles softly. Someone shapes a new tool from stone. A child watches closely, learning each movement. Another person weaves reeds into a basket. An elder paints a line of ochre on a smooth rock, passing knowledge without words. There is no rush, no noise, no pressure. Innovation unfolds in gentle silence. The world has no cities, no monuments, no recorded history. But humanity is building its future one idea at a time. Long before civilization, humans were already inventors, curious, observant, creative, determined. These early innovations became the quiet foundations on which all future achievements would stand. And though their names are lost, their ideas remain alive in every tool we use, every structure we build, every art we create. Innovation did not begin with civilization. Civilization began with the innovators who lived in the silence before it. Long before the first temple rose from stone, before writing carved meaning into clay tablets, and long before cities stood beneath the sun, humanity already carried a world of stories within its heart. In caves lit by flickering fires, beneath endless skies, and along riverbanks softened by time, people shared songs, symbols, and early myths that connected them to one another, and to something greater than themselves. These expressions were not yet religion as we know it. They were not yet culture in any formal sense, but they were the first signs of a deeper human truth, that we search not only for survival, but for meaning. Imagine a night tens of thousands of years ago. The world is dark except for the glow of a fire inside a cave. Shadows shift across rough stone walls, and the first artists move closer with pigments made from ochre, charcoal, and ground minerals. Their hands are steady, guided by memory and imagination. Slowly, carefully, they begin to paint. Animals appear first, powerful, graceful, moving across the walls as if alive. Then shapes, spirals, handprints, symbols that meant something then even if their meanings are lost to us now. These paintings were not decoration. They were communication. They were memory made visible. This is the first quiet twist of the chapter. Art was the earliest language and the first attempt to make the invisible visible. When the paintings were complete, the artist stepped back. The firelight flickered across the images, giving them motion, breath, and spirit. In that moment, stories were born. But art was not the only expression of this ancient awakening. Singers emerged, voices rising softly into the night as families gathered together. Their songs were simple, melodic, shaped by rhythm and heartbeat. They may have imitated animals, winds, or flowing water. They may have marked the passing of seasons or the return of herds. Whatever their form, these songs carried emotion across generations. A mother sang to a child. A group sang to ease the fear of darkness. Hunters sang before a dangerous journey. Music became a thread connecting the living, a bridge between the known and the unknown. It is here that mythology took its earliest breaths. People began to wonder why storms came and why the sun returned after months of cold. They wondered where the dead traveled when their bodies grew still. They wondered who watched over the world when night fell and the stars opened their eyes. From these questions came the earliest myths, whispered stories, not written on tablets but spoken softly around fires. These myths may have explained creation, praised ancestors, or described spirits who lived in rivers, mountains, and skies. They answered questions that science had not yet begun to ask. The second twist of this chapter emerges. Myths were humanity's first attempt to understand the world, not through facts, but through meaning. Imagine a family gathered around a fire while an elder speaks. Their voice is low and rhythmic. Children lean closer. Adults listen with quiet respect. The elder tells of an ancient hunt that shaped their people's destiny, or of a spirit that guards the valley, or of the first fire that humans ever discovered. Whether these tales were literal or symbolic did not matter. What mattered was what they taught: unity, caution, gratitude, identity. These stories carried wisdom, knowledge that could not be carved into stone but could be carried in memory. Symbols began to appear not only in paintings, but on tools, beads, carvings, and even the bodies of the living. Lines, dots, spirals, and patterns decorated objects with meaning known only to those who made them. A carved bone might show a ritual event. A pattern on a tool might represent a clan or lineage. A shell necklace might mark the passage from childhood to adulthood. These symbols were the earliest hints of culture, visual markers of belonging. But symbolism grew beyond objects. It entered ritual. People gathered for births, for hunts, for the changing of seasons. They danced, sang, painted their bodies, and left offerings at sacred sites. Some rituals honored the land, others honored ancestors. Some may have helped ease the fear of forces humans could not control. These rituals were more than moments of celebration. They were the beginnings of organized belief. This is the third twist, quiet but profound. Before there were buildings, there were civilizations of the mind. Civilization, in its earliest form, did not require walls or cities. It required shared understanding. Shared stories, shared rituals. In these early gatherings, people were not simply surviving. They were creating identity. Now imagine a ritual at dusk. A circle of people stands beneath the sky as the first stars appear. Their faces are painted with earth pigments. Someone begins a soft, steady rhythm, perhaps beating a drum made from stretched hide. Another voice rises, then another, until the group sings together. The song echoes across the landscape, rising into mountains and drifting across plains. In this moment, the people feel something larger than themselves. Not a god, not yet. Not a religion as we understand it, but a presence, a feeling that life is more than mere survival. This sense would eventually grow into the great myths, stories, and spiritual beliefs of future civilizations. But in this early age, it was still raw, still forming, still emerging from the human heart. We often think of civilization as beginning with agriculture, writing, or the rise of cities. But these early expressions, songs, symbols, myths, were the first true steps toward civilization. They created shared memory. They shaped identity. They brought unity not through force but through meaning. The ancient world was filled not with silence but with story. Humans whispered to the night. They sang to the sky. They carved their memories into stone. They painted their world onto cave walls. They created symbols that carried the weight of generations. These expressions formed the cultural foundations on which future societies would build. As this chapter comes to a gentle close, imagine one last scene, a cave deep within a hillside. Paintings glow softly in the dim firelight. Children sit beside adults, listening to a story older than memory. The storyteller gestures toward the images on the wall, their voice calm and steady. Outside, the world sleeps beneath a blanket of stars. Within this small circle of warmth and light, humanity takes its first steps into meaning. Into myth, into culture, into civilization, not with stone buildings or written laws, but with songs carried on the wind, symbols carved into bone, and stories whispered in the darkness. These early beliefs were the first civilizations, civilizations of spirit, imagination, and memory. Civilizations built without walls, but strong enough to last across millennia. For most of human history, the Earth was not a fixed or predictable home. It was a shifting stage, its climate changing like the rhythm of breath, its landscapes rising and falling, its creatures appearing and disappearing across the ages. For early humans, the world was a place in motion, constantly reshaping itself. And whether we thrived or vanished depended on our ability to follow these changes, to read the signs written in wind, water, and stone. Nothing stayed the same for long, not the forests, not the plains. Not the coastlines, not even the sky's familiar seasons. This is the first truth of the ancient world. Change was not an event, it was the environment itself. Imagine a band of humans traveling through a valley that has fed their families for generations. The land is lush, the river generous, the herds plentiful. But then the weather begins to shift. Winters grow harsher, summers shorten. The river dries to a thin stream. Animals migrate deeper into the forests or farther north. Storms come more often. The valley is no longer the world they once knew. Slowly, quietly, the people begin to move. Not because they wish to, but because the earth demands it. Some groups adapt to the new conditions, learning different hunting strategies, changing their tools, gathering new plants, building stronger shelters. Others cannot. Their numbers dwindle. They fade into memory, their stories carried only in fragments and bones. This is the second twist of the chapter. Climate shaped human destiny more than any invention or idea. We often imagine humans shaping the earth, but for most of our history, the earth shaped us. Every migration, every cultural shift, every adaptation began with the environment. When temperatures fell, we learned to sew warmer clothing. When forests expanded, we became skilled at moving through trees. When grasslands opened across continents, we became long-distance walkers and hunters. The world changed, and humanity changed with it. But the changes were not gentle. They were vast and often catastrophic. Entire species vanished, mammoths, giant sloths, saber-toothed cats, disappearing from the world forever. These extinctions altered ecosystems, forcing humans to adjust their diets, tools, and strategies. The disappearance of one animal could ripple through hundreds of miles of landscape, reshaping daily life for generations. Imagine a group who once relied on a single large animal for food, clothing, and tools. Its extinction is not just a loss of prey, it is a loss of identity. They must learn again, adapt again, rebuild their knowledge from the ground up. Some groups succeed. Others vanish into the deep silence of prehistory. And yet, despite the hardships, the changing earth opened new possibilities. Glaciers melted, revealing fertile plains where nothing had grown for thousands of years. Shorelines retreated, exposing coastal paths that led humans to new continents. Forests expanded, offering new sources of food, shelter, and medicine. Rivers shifted, carving new routes across the land. Wherever the earth transformed, humans followed. Picture the vast ice sheets retreating at the end of the last ice age. Water flows into valleys, shaping lakes and rivers. Plants begin to grow where ice once stood. Animals return. For early humans, this is not just a shift in scenery. It is a new world opening before their eyes. The people explore it cautiously. They learn the behavior of new animals. They gather unfamiliar plants. They watch the sky for signs of changing weather. Slowly, step by step, they build their lives anew. This ability, this willingness to change with the earth is one of humanity's greatest strengths. It is what allowed us to spread across continents, to survive extreme climates, to persist when other species vanished. But adaptation came with a cost. Every migration required sacrifice. Communities were uprooted. Traditions were abandoned or transformed. Knowledge tied to specific landscapes was lost when those landscapes changed. The Earth's shifting conditions did not simply test the body. They tested memory, culture, and identity. This brings us to the third twist of the chapter. The Earth shaped not just where we lived, but who we became. People who lived in forests learned quiet movement and herbal knowledge. People who lived on plains became endurance runners and hunters. People who lived near coasts developed fishing techniques, rafts, and navigation skills. People who lived in cold regions mastered fire, clothing, and shelter. Each environment carved a different version of humanity. Each landscape produced new forms of skill, tradition, and wisdom. Across thousands of years, these experiences accumulated, shaping our minds as much as our bodies. We learned to anticipate change, to prepare for uncertainty, to think ahead. We learned patience during long winters, resilience during droughts, and courage during migrations into the unknown. But perhaps the most profound lesson was this: nothing lasts forever, not even the land beneath our feet. The coastlines that once supported human groups now lie beneath the ocean. The grasslands where families hunted for generations have turned into deserts or forests. The rivers that guided ancestors across continents have shifted miles away. The mountains that shaped ancient migrations continue to rise and erode. And through all of this, humans walked forward. Imagine a final scene. A group stands at the edge of a cliff overlooking a valley. The land below them is changing, slowly but unmistakably. A river has carved a new path. Trees have begun to grow where none stood before. Animals have migrated to distant hills. The world they inherited is not the world they will pass on. They watch quietly, feeling both fear and possibility. Then, as always, they begin to move toward new land, toward new challenges, toward a future shaped by the Earth's shifting hand. For tens of thousands of years, the world changed, and humans changed with it, learning, adapting, surviving, becoming. The Earth was never still. It rose, it fell, it froze, it warmed. And through it all, humanity kept walking. Every path we took was carved by the changing world beneath us. And every step we took shaped the people we would one day become. When the long grip of the Ice Age finally began to loosen, the world stirred once more. The cold softened. The glaciers retreated. Rivers flowed where ice had once carved deep scars across the land. And with this thaw, a new era of human movement began, quiet, vast, and unstoppable. For tens of thousands of years, the Earth had been locked in deep cold. Paths were blocked by ice. Mountains were sealed behind frozen walls. Whole regions lay silent and unreachable. But as the climate warmed, those barriers melted. The land opened like a great map, slowly unfolding, revealing new routes, new valleys, and new possibilities. Humanity, shaped by millennia of wandering, responded in the only way it knew how. We walked forward. This is the first truth of this chapter. The end of the Ice Age was not a time of stillness. It was a time of renewed movement. Imagine a group standing on a hill at dawn. Where once they saw white glaciers stretching to the horizon, they now see green land emerging from beneath the melting ice. Streams glitter in the early light. Birds return. The air carries a softness unfamiliar to generations before them. This world is changing and inviting, and so they begin again. As temperatures rose, enormous migrations unfolded across continents. Families left their ancestral lands, following rivers that were once frozen pathways. Hunters tracked herds into freshly thawed plains. Gatherers discovered new plants sprouting in warming soil. The world itself seemed to breathe again. These migrations were not quick. They were slow and deliberate, spreading over thousands of years. But they carried humanity farther than ever before, into Asia's deep forests, across Europe's rolling hills, along the coasts of Australia, and eventually into the vast, untouched lands of the Americas. The second twist of this chapter is profound. These migrations were not just movements of people. They were movements of memory. Wherever humans walked, they carried stories from earlier ages, lines of knowledge preserved through generations. They remembered which plants were safe, how to track animals, how to build shelters, how to make fire in rain or wind. They carried myths about the spirits of the land, about ancestors who once crossed mountains now lost beneath the ice. Every new group was shaped not only by the land they entered, but by the memories they brought with them. Imagine a family resting beside a riverbank that had been locked beneath ice for centuries. The water is clear and cold, rushing over stones polished by time. Children play near the edge. Elders watch the horizon with a mixture of wonder and caution, knowing that this place, though new, echoes the teachings of their ancestors. These migrations were both discovery and remembrance. As groups spread into new regions, cultures began to diverge in ways that still influence humanity today. Some settled in lush forests overflowing with new plants and animals. Others crossed dry plains where the wind carried dust from distant mountains. Some followed herds into northern lands where the night stayed light in summer. Others traveled south into warm climates shaped by monsoon rains. Out of these environments came new tools, new rituals, new ways of life. This is the third twist. Culture is born from movement as much as from place. In warm regions, people created lighter shelters and wove grasses into baskets. In colder regions, they developed layered clothing and refined their fire-making skills. In coastal regions, they built rafts and began to read the tides and stars with astonishing precision. These changes did not erase older traditions, they transformed them. Old memories met new landscapes. Ancient lessons mixed with fresh experiences. Culture became a living thing, constantly evolving. But these migrations were not always easy. New lands meant new dangers, unknown predators, unpredictable weather, rivers that flooded in spring, plants that healed or poisoned depending on the season, yet through trial and memory, humans learned. Imagine a group cresting a hill and seeing an unfamiliar valley stretched below. They do not rush down, they watch, they wait. They study the movement of animals, the pattern of clouds, the curve of the river. In these observations lies survival, an ancient intelligence shaped across generations of wandering. They mark safe places. They avoid dangerous ones. They adapt once more. Intersections between migrating groups became moments of transformation. When two wandering families met after months or years apart, they exchanged ideas, tools, symbols, and rituals. A new style of tool-making could spread across continents this way. A myth from one region could take root in another. A technique for preserving food could save lives hundreds of miles away. Humanity was never isolated. We grew through connection. These meetings were the quiet engines of cultural evolution. As the Ice Age truly ended, coastlines shifted dramatically. Water filled valleys that had once been dry, creating lakes and oceans. Land bridges disappeared beneath rising seas. Regions that had been easily accessible became islands, and islands became isolated worlds where cultures evolved in unique and extraordinary ways. Yet the migrations continued, by boat, by foot, by memory. People crossed straits, climbed mountains, and followed rivers deep into unknown lands. Imagine a small raft made of wood and reeds drifting across calm water under a sky streaked with stars. A handful of travelers look ahead, guided by currents and constellations. They do not know what awaits across the waves, but the instinct to explore, to move forward, has shaped their people for thousands of years. This instinct is older than civilization, older than agriculture, older than written language. It is woven into our identity. As we near the soft close of this chapter, imagine one final scene, a quiet morning after a long migration. The sun rises gently over a landscape untouched by human footsteps. A group stands together, taking in the view. They feel both the strangeness of this new land and the familiarity of the journey itself. Every migration before this one has taught them something: how to read the land, how to listen to the seasons, how to trust one another, how to survive. They carry old memories with them, but they also carry the possibility of new beginnings. The great migrations renewed were not merely movements across space. They were movements across time, linking past lessons to future worlds. Humanity expanded again, reaching every corner of the earth. And with each step, each river crossed, each mountain passed. New cultures were born, rooted in ancient memory, yet shaped by the new lands beneath their feet. Movement was not just survival. Movement was creation. There was a time, long before the first words were written, long before stone cities rose beneath the sun, when humanity stood at the edge of something entirely new. It did not arrive suddenly. It did not begin with a single invention or a single moment of brilliance. Instead, it unfolded quietly, gently, like the first pale light of dawn spreading across a dark horizon. This was the quiet dawn before history. For tens of thousands of years, humans lived in small bands, moving from place to place with the rhythm of the seasons. But as the world warmed and food sources grew more predictable, something began to change. People stayed in one place a little longer. Communities gathered more often. Knowledge accumulated like soft layers of sediment, building upon everything that had come before. Life was becoming organized, not through rules or leaders, but through the simple patterns of living together. Imagine a cluster of shelters built near a river. Smoke rises from cooking fires. Children play near the water's edge. Adults repair tools, prepare food, or share stories. These gatherings are not yet villages, yet something village-like has begun. People know one another. They rely on one another. They recognize that their strength lies in the group, not the individual. This is the first quiet twist of the chapter. Society began not with cities, but with shared memory. As people stayed in one area longer, knowledge no longer disappeared with each generation. Elders became living libraries, passing down skills in tracking, tool-making, plant medicine, and the patterns of the stars. Younger generations listened, learned, and added their own discoveries. Bit by bit, knowledge accumulated, layer by layer, story by story. Now imagine an elder teaching a group of children how to read the sky. The elder points to a constellation long associated with migration or the coming of a particular animal. The children repeat the pattern, committing it to memory. They do not know it, but they are inheriting the building blocks of astronomy. And so, without writing, without books, without monuments, the foundations of science began. As communities grew, their tools became more refined. Stone blades gained smoother edges. Spears were balanced for distance and accuracy. Cooking improved. Clothing became more fitted, more functional. Innovation no longer relied solely on the individual. It emerged from the community. The second twist of this chapter reveals itself here. Innovation accelerates when people live together. What one person invented, others could improve. What one group discovered, another could refine. Ideas began to spread more quickly, not across great migrations, but across shared daily life. A new method of shaping stone, a new way to preserve food, a new technique for weaving baskets or stretching hides. These changes were small, but together they transformed human life. With organization came something else, something subtle, almost invisible, *** roles. Some members of the community became skilled hunters. Others became tool makers. Some specialized in gathering plants or herbs. Others served as storytellers, guardians of memory. This specialization was not strict. People still shared responsibilities. But slowly, over generations, individuals began to develop certain strengths that shaped the way communities worked. This was the earliest form of social structure, simple, flexible, built not upon hierarchy but upon shared purpose. Imagine a group preparing for winter. One person gathers materials for shelter. Another sharpens spear points. Others collect firewood or gather dried berries. They do not plan this formally. They simply know what must be done and who is best suited to each task. This harmony, this cooperative rhythm, was the heartbeat of the quiet dawn. As communities became more stable, humanity began to shape the land in new ways. Footpaths formed between repeating campsites. Water sources were protected. Gathering spots became familiar landmarks passed from one season to the next. People began to understand the land not just as a temporary home, but as a place of continuity, a place that connected past and future. And with continuity came rituals. People returned to certain caves or cliffs year after year. They buried their dead with care, using beads or pigments as symbols of respect. They offered thanks after successful hunts. They performed dances or songs tied to the turning of seasons. These rituals strengthened identity. They deepened the sense of belonging. They hinted at something humanity was slowly growing toward, culture rooted in place. This leads us to the third twist. Before civilization, there was anticipation. Humans did not know what they were building. They did not know they were laying the groundwork for agriculture, for writing, for cities. But their actions, their organization, their shared knowledge, their rituals were quietly preparing the world for a transformation that would unfold thousands of years later. The Earth itself participated in this preparation. The climate grew more stable. Seasons became more predictable. Plants grew in abundance along river valleys. Animals gathered in certain regions year after year. The stage was being set. Imagine a final scene. A community gathers at dusk. The sky glows orange as the sun sinks behind distant hills. Smoke drifts upward from cooking fires. Children play nearby, their laughter soft and warm. Adults sit in a circle, sharing food, passing stories, reflecting on the day. They do not know that they stand at the edge of history. They do not know that their descendants will build cities, plant fields, and write their stories in clay. They simply live, unaware that the world is preparing them for something entirely new. Their lives are quiet, humble, woven with cooperation and memory. Yet these simple acts, building shelters, sharing food, remembering stories, are the foundation upon which all future civilizations will rise. This was the quiet dawn before history. A dawn without monuments, a dawn without records, a dawn defined not by events but by preparation. The world was changing. Humanity was organizing, knowledge was deepening. And somewhere in the distance, hidden just beyond the horizon of time, the first true spark of civilization waited to emerge. For nearly 90,000 years, humanity lived without a single written word. Every story, every lesson, every memory passed from one voice to another, carried across generations like fragile sparks entrusted to the wind. Then, in a moment small and quiet but immeasurably important, something changed. Humans began to write. It did not begin with books. It did not begin with alphabets. It began with marks, simple lines carved into clay, stone, or bone. Marks that meant something to the people who made them. Marks that did not fade when the speaker slept. Marks that did not vanish when the storyteller was gone. This was the awakening of writing, and with it, the awakening of history. Imagine a warm river valley thousands of years ago. A settlement has slowly taken shape. Small homes clustered together, families working side by side, food stored in clay pots. Among them sits a single individual with a reed in hand, pressing shapes into soft clay. Their movements are steady, deliberate. Each symbol carries meaning, grain harvested, trades agreed upon, offerings made. They are not thinking of the future. They are not imagining that their marks will survive millennia. They are simply solving a problem, recording what the mind can forget. And yet, in this moment, humanity steps out of prehistory. This is the first quiet twist of the chapter. Writing did not create civilization. Civilization created writing. As communities grew larger, memory alone was no longer enough. People needed ways to track food, land, seasons, and agreements. They needed ways to preserve knowledge beyond a single lifetime. Writing emerged not as art, but as necessity. But the arrival of writing did something extraordinary. It allowed ideas to live longer than the people who created them. For the first time, knowledge became permanent. A single clay tablet could carry a voice across centuries. A carved stone could bridge worlds separated by time. Stories that once flickered briefly in the firelight became anchored in solid matter. Imagine a scribe carving marks into stone. Their hands are steady, their eyes focused. They know that what they write will endure storms, floods, and the slow decay of memory. They are creating a world that exists outside the mind. Through writing, humanity discovered continuity, and with continuity, civilization blossomed. Cities rose along rivers: the Nile, the Tigris, the Euphrates, the Indus, the Yellow River. People gathered in numbers unimaginable in earlier eras. Homes, temples, workshops, markets, and roads formed intricate networks of activity. Civilization appeared suddenly, as if the world had been preparing for it all along. In truth, it had. This is the second twist of the chapter. The rise of civilization was built on the silent foundations of 90,000 years. The communities that grew in the warming world, the cooperation forged in the Ice Age, the tools crafted in forests, plains, and tundras. The stories told around fires, the rituals that shaped meaning, the migrations that connected continents. All of these formed the invisible groundwork beneath the first cities. People did not become civilized overnight. They simply took the next natural step, the step that writing made possible. With writing came history, not as we know it, but as a living memory. The deeds of leaders were recorded. The flow of rivers was measured. The movement of stars was mapped. Laws were written to resolve disputes. Stories were preserved to teach and inspire. Humanity could now look backward and see itself. Imagine a clay tablet filled with symbols. It tells of a harvest, a king, a flood, or a myth older than the stones beneath it. The tablet is simple but powerful. Through it, a moment in time becomes immortal. But even as writing flourished, something else faded. The long age before writing, the vast stretch of human existence, remained quiet, silent, missing from the records, missing from the stories we tell about ourselves. This is the third twist, soft and bittersweet. History remembers writing, but the world before writing remembers us. The early humans who crossed mountains and deserts, the inventors who shaped stone and bone, the storytellers who whispered myths by firelight, the communities who survived ice and drought, the artists who painted caves with visions we still do not fully understand. They shaped the world we inherited. They prepared the ground on which writing would one day stand. And yet their story, greater in length than all recorded history combined, remains mostly unspoken. Their lives are preserved not in words, but in the earth itself, in artifacts, bones, tools, and traces left beneath ancient soil. In the landscapes carved by glaciers and shaped by migration, in the DNA carried silently in every human alive today. As civilization rose, writing spread across continents. Cuneiform in Mesopotamia, hieroglyphs in Egypt, symbols etched into Chinese oracle bones, scripts emerging independently in Mesoamerica, each writing system unique. Each responding to the needs of its people, each marking the end of humanity's long, unwritten age. These marks became stories. Stories became history. History became culture. And culture became memory shared across thousands of years. The world had awakened to a new way of existing. As this chapter draws to its gentle close, imagine one final scene, a sunrise over an ancient city. The rooftops glow in soft morning light. Smoke rises from hearths. People walk along dusty paths to fields, marketplaces, and temples. Inside a quiet room, a scribe leans over a clay tablet, writing the first lines of a story that will outlive them. They do not know that they stand at the turning point of human existence. They do not know that their marks will echo across millennia. They simply write. Because their ancestors taught them to think, to cooperate, to remember. History begins here, but the story began long before. For 90,000 years, humanity lived in silence, a silence filled with learning, adaptation, exploration, and imagination. A silence that shaped the very people who would one day break it with writing. The dawn of writing was not the dawn of humanity. It was merely the moment when humanity finally learned to leave a trace, and the long age before cities. The age of wanderers, inventors, artists, and dreamers remains the most mysterious, most profound chapter of our past. A chapter written not in words, but in us.